Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony, which today commemorates the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Milne Bay. My name's Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Lachlan Fryer. We warmly welcome the family of Squadron Leader Peter St George Bruce Turnbull, whose story will be told shortly. We're honoured to welcome veterans of the Battle of Milne Bay who are joining us today, as well as those who are here to remember their family and friends who were involved in the action. We're honoured to acknowledge Mr Sakius Tamio, Charge d'Affaires, High Commission of Papua New Guinea, Air Chief Marshal Mark Binskin, Chief of the Defence Force, the Honourable Dan Tehan, Minister for Veterans Affairs, Vice Admiral Ray Griggs, Vice Chief of the Defence Force, Commodore Brenton Smythe, representing Chief of Navy, Lieutenant General Angus Campbell, Chief of Army, Air Marshal Leo Davies, Chief of Air Force, Warrant Officer Class 1 Don Spinks, Regimental Sergeant Major, Australian Army, Warrant Officer Robert Swanwick, Warrant Officer of the Air Force, Mr John King, representing the National President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, and Mr Alex McGowan, representing the National President of the Naval Association of Australia. Wing Commodore Robert Robertson, retired, representing the Royal Australian Air Force Association. Mrs Pat McCabe, National President, TPI Association of Australia, and Mrs Meg Green, National President, the War Widows Guild of Australia. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. We also welcome Royal Military College Special Services officers, as well as members of 2-4 Royal Australian Regiment Association and Wangaratta Army Cadet Unit. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. I would now like to invite Dr. Brendan Nelson, Director of the Australian War Memorial, to address you.
Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We just sang it. We sang it often. We hear it sung often. But less often do we pause to reflect on what it really means. We are young and we are free. In no small way for the events that bring us here today. And the ageing veterans, proudly wearing their medals, and some others here that are not, who gave us that freedom. 1788 was the most important year in this country's history. The British First Fleet arrived, all of the devastation that would bring to Indigenous Australia, but from it the origins of the Australia we would become and the people that we now are. By any standard, the next most important year was 1942. The Second World War was no mere extension of the First. This was not about our national emerging identity, nor our place in the world. Our vital interests were at stake. The fall of Singapore, days later, the bombing of Darwin, the first of 68 attacks on the Australian mainland in 1942. The Battle of the Coral Sea, United States Navy and the Royal Australian Navy, the strategic defeat delivered to the Japanese there, and then the routing of their navy at Midway in June 1942. 3 Japanese midget submarines in Sydney Harbour. Guadalcanal, the gripping struggle on Kokoda, and then of course Isuava. But the pivotal moment was this, 75 years ago today, in the Battle of Milne Bay. It says much about our nation and us that not more is said about it. Those men, those veterans that are here, your mates who have gone, the 161 whose names are on the bronze panels that cloak us here in the Roll of Honour, we owe you a debt that most Australians do not understand, let alone can we repay. But on this day, and every day, we remember you and we remember them. 75 years ago today, on the night of the 25th of August 1942, 2,800 Japanese Marines landed at Milne Bay, on the southeastern tip of Papua. Their intention was to capture the Allied airstrips that were protecting seaward passages to the east, and their orders were to smash to pieces the enemy lines and take the aerodrome by storm. Initially, the Japanese met with their accustomed success. Nothing had stopped the Japanese advance since its landing on the Malay Peninsula in December 1941. Supported by 2 light tanks, they advanced steadily inland, advancing toward the airfields. The Allies, however, had been forewarned of the landing and had heavily reinforced the garrison. Milne Bay was said to have 2 seasons, the wet and the rainy, and the battle that followed raged through incessant rain, ankle-deep mud, thick jungle, malaria-ridden swamps, pitch-black nights. By late August, these Australians that are here, had regained the initiative, forcing the Japanese back along the coast, and on the 7th of September, enemy forces had been evacuated by sea. Of the 2,800 Japanese who landed at Milne Bay, only 1,300 made the evacuation. 750 lay dead around the bay, while others died attempting to escape overland to Boona. More than 161 Australians gave their lives for us, including 36 who had been captured, bayoneted and executed. 14 Americans were also killed, as well, of course, as 59 Papuans. Milne Bay was the first decisive defeat of the Japanese offensive on land during the Second World War. It was a major Allied victory. The British Field Marshal, Sir William Slim, later said, "Australian troops had, at Milne Bay in New Guinea, inflicted on the Japanese their first undoubted defeat on land. Some of us may forget that of all of the Allies, it was the Australian soldiers who first broke the invincibility of the Japanese." The victory at Milne Bay owed much to the Royal Australian Air Force, whose Kitty Hawks sank enemy landing craft and shipping, destroyed stockpiles of supplies and suppressed enemy troop movements. The sinking of enemy barges in particular cut those supply lines and prevented the Japanese performing outflanking manoeuvres across the coastline. Such was the critical importance of Numbers 75 and 76 Squadron that Major General Cyril Clowes, the commander of the Allied forces at Milne Bay, praised their untiring and courageous work, which has earned the admiration of them all. Quite simply, without the Royal Australian Air Force, there would not have been an Allied victory there. Today, remember those who fought at Milne Bay. We pay our abiding respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, to the survivors that returned home, and the families who loved and still love and continued to support them.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we pay tribute to Squadron Leader Peter St George Bruce Turnbull. Born in Armidale in the New England region of New South Wales on the 9th of February 1917, Peter Turnbull was the son of Archibald and Maud Gwendolyn Turnbull. The Turnbulls were well-known graziers in New England region, and Peter grew up on his father's property, Glenrule, near Glen Innes. The young Peter attended New England Grammar School in Glen Innes, where he passed his intermediate exams. He represented his school in A-grade soccer and the town in swimming and A-grade cricket. A top horse rider, Turnbull held the Australian Championship for bullock riding and bulldogging, a rodeo event where a steer is wrestled to the ground, which he won at the Warwick Show in Queensland. He also won championships at the Royal Sydney Show. Turnbull worked as an electrician in Glen Innes. He also served as a trooper in the 2nd 24th Light Horse Regiment of the Militia. After enlisting in the Royal Australian Air Force in January 1939, Turnbull began training as an air cadet at Point Cook, Victoria. While he was undergoing pilot training, the Second World War broke out. After completing his training in October 1939, Turnbull was posted to No. 3 Squadron, a fighter squadron that specialised in cooperation with ground units. On the 15th of July 1940, the squadron left Sydney, bound for the Middle East. The following month, Turnbull arrived in Egypt, where No. 3 Squadron were equipped with Gloucester Gladiator aircraft that they flew during the early period of the North African campaign. In early 1941, the squadron converted to Hawker Hurricanes, and on the 3rd of April, Turnbull shot down 4 Messerschmitt Bf-110s in a single sortie. Not long afterwards, No. 3 Squadron moved to Palestine and was re-equipped with P-40 Tomahawks. Turnbull served with the squadron with great distinction through the Syrian campaign of June and July 1941, and in October he was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross. His medal citation read that throughout his service, Turnbull had shown a magnificent fighting spirit and great skill. In November 1941, Turnbull returned to Australia, where he was posted first to No. 24 Squadron and then 3 Service Flying Training School in Amberley, Queensland. In March 1942, he joined No. 75 Squadron, which was based at Port Moresby and engaged in the defence of the city. In May, Turnbull was posted as the commanding officer of No. 76 Squadron. He was promoted squadron leader the following month. Equipped with P-40 Kitty Hawks, No. 76 Squadron was sent to Papua at the end of July to defend Milne Bay. Following the landing by Japanese Marines at Milne Bay on the 25th of August, the RAF Kitty Hawks of No. 75 and No. 76 Squadrons played a crucial role. They destroyed Japanese landing barges and stores, and flying at treetop level, they strafed enemy positions and suppressed enemy movement. On the 27th of August, Turnbull was on a mission to spot and attack 2 Japanese tanks that had been causing heavy casualties on the ground. He spotted his target and dove in to attack, but failed to pull up in time, crashing into the jungle. 8 days later, a patrol from 2nd 12th Battalion discovered the crash site near KB Mission and recovered Turnbull's body. He was buried in the temporary cemetery at Milne Bay and later interned at the larger Bamana War Cemetery in Port Moresby. Such was the regard which Turnbull was held amongst the pilots and troops on the ground. The official historian of the campaign wrote, "Soldiers much admired and appreciated the work of the 2 RAF squadrons, and, for them, the gallant Turnbull had epitomised the courage and skill of all the airmen." Australia's defeat of the Japanese at Milne Bay owed much to the Royal Australian Air Force, whose Kitty Hawks sank enemy landing craft and shipping, destroyed stockpiles of supplies and suppressed enemy troop movements. Such was the importance of numbers 75 and 76 squadrons that Major General Cyril Clales specifically praised the RAF's untiring and courageous work, which has earned the admiration of all. Commander New Guinea Force, Lieutenant General Sidney Rale, likewise noted that the actions of the 2 RAF fighter squadrons were the battle's decisive factor. After Turnbull's death in Milne Bay, No. 3 Strip was renamed Turnbull Field in his honour. His name is listed here on the Roll of Honour on my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Squadron Leader Peter St George Bruce Turnbull, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.